Ivo Daalder was the US ambassador to NATO. You are ambassador to NATO, and now you find that, of course, the US might be planning some form of activity against a NATO member by association, if you will. What do you make of it all?
Well, of course, this is deeply, deeply disturbing. Whether something happens or not is in and of itself one thing. The very idea, which is being stressed, including in the statement you just read by Carolyn Levitt, that the only way the United States can ensure the security of Greenland is by owning it, is a blow to the NATO alliance. Because, in fact, the alliance consists of an idea that the way we can ensure security of each other is by being willing to defend each other. There is nothing that NATO doesn't provide today to ensure America's security in the NATO alliance, of the United States, and in Greenland. But by making this distinction that security requires owning territory, we are undermining the fundamental principle of the NATO alliance.
All right, but they don't seem to care about that. So let me ask, what do you think are the ways? Look, let's be clear, sir, Ambassador. You never thought you'd have to answer this question, and I never thought I'd ever have to ask such a question. But we are where we are, so let's plough on regardless. What are the ways, in your view, that the US could annex Greenland?
Well, it could do it in a number of different ways. I mean, one, it could just declare that Greenland is now part of the United States, deploy a relatively small military force, and tell Denmark and the people of Greenland, you don't like it, try to figure out how to change the status quo. We can just declare in some ways that Greenland becomes part of the United States, knowing that we have the military forces to prevent Denmark or the people in Greenland of retaking total sovereignty and control of their territory. That's what's happened, by the way, with parts of Ukraine. It's what the Chinese are threatening with regard to Taiwan. And it would just make this idea that in this world that we live in, the strong do as they will, and the weak shall do as they must. So it's not that difficult. The problem is the consequences of that.
Right, but so let's look at those consequences. Firstly, there's a world of difference between deposing Maduro, where you may get a lot of people who say, yeah, rah, rah, excellent, excellent, and subjugating a democratic country where you could end up with an entire population, all right, only tens of thousands, but actually who are against you.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it does make a difference. Venezuela's got 28 million, which is one of the reasons why the way we're going to run it is by declaring it. In the case of Greenland, frankly, it's 50,000 people, and most of whom happen to live in Thule, in Nuuk, the capital, and a relatively small military force could control that with very little consequence and very little casualties. Right. But it's the consequences of doing that, again, for NATO, for global peace and security, that is being ignored by the statements that are coming out of the White House.
Can you see a scenario where an annexation or any form of unfriendly action, I'm choosing that word particularly because, basically making it very difficult and making it clear that the Greenland is part of the US, does not trigger Article 5?
Well, Article 5 is a political doctrine. It requires unanimity. So almost by definition, it wouldn't trigger Article 5. Denmark might call for Article 5. 30 nations might support Denmark in it, but one, presumably the United States, would not, in which case you cannot invoke Article 5. It's not an automatic commitment. It's a political commitment. It needs to be invoked.
So can I just quickly follow up on that? So if we got to the stage of an attempt to invoke Article 5, or at least something similar, and it wasn't unanimous, but everybody else was in favour, essentially we are at the end of NATO.
Yeah, and I think that's what the Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen said. If this happens, NATO stops. It is dead. and therefore, and there isn't really a concerted military campaign that
Right.
NATO nations other than the United States could launch. So you'd have to think about economic measures, and there, of course, Europe has far more capability and far more ability to inflict damage on the United States, and somehow that seems to be forgotten. Europe is a part of 450 million people in the European Union. Tariffs could be invoked, sanctions could be placed, U.S.
Oy.
businesses could be
Yep.
taken hold of in one form or another. You could escalate this very quickly, which is why this is such a dangerous and totally unacceptable kind of behavior.
I'm grateful to you, sir. You never thought you'd be talking about this. I guarantee you that. Maybe except in some seminar or some theoretical, but here we are, and that's where we are. I'm grateful to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.